hands and close your eyes. It's midnight, and you're listening to the Ghost Story Guys. Welcome to the Ghost Story Guys. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
This is a show where we talk about spooks, specters, and all the other things watching us from the shadows beyond the campfire. Some conversations only make sense after the sun has set, and this is most definitely one. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 196, and we're coming to you from that tiny mountain cabin where Paul is recently engaged. Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you very much. I thought I'd best do it this century. I haven't been engaged this century.
That is fair. I will say, I did not know that was going to happen when I made this an episode about haunted prisons, so there will be no ball and chain jokes. None of that was intentional. Just so we're clear.
Yeah, well, nobody knew. I'd kept it a complete secret, so I hadn't told anybody when I was going to do it.
Oh, that's amazing. So how long were you planning it?
A couple of months.
Okay. Jesus Christ, I'm impressed. If I buy someone a gift and their birthday's in tomorrow, they're going to get it today. So I'm very impressed by this.
Yes. So, surprised her, which was quite funny because it was quite... so it was first thing in the morning because obviously it was a birthday. So I wasn't the sharpest tool in the box, shall we say. And so did it. And she was like, oh, and she was all happy in that. And then about 10 minutes later, she just went, oh, it's just hit me. And so going, and then she said, oh, well, I want you to get on one knee and do it again. So I did. But she liked the ring, and that's the most important thing.
It is a lovely ring.
Yes, a nice vintage antique ring.
Oh, no kidding.
As I said to her, I said, just be thankful. The last person that wore that had it cut off.
Paul Romance Bestall.
Who says it's dead? Not in our house. She seems happy about it, so I suppose we've done all right there.
That's brilliant shit, man. I'm so very happy for you. Do you guys have a sense of a date yet?
Well, 2027. As I've said, can't do it next year. I've got something planned the year after as World Cup.
I wondered if the World Cup had something to do with it.
Of course it does. So 2027 is the first non-football tournament year that I'm free.
Okay. There we go.
I have always said if I got married, it wouldn't be in the football season because I know what some of my friends are like, and we would be doing something, and then all of a sudden we'd hear, "Yes, get in!" So no. But we're hopefully going to get married in the local haunted place that does weddings. So fingers crossed we can get in.
Oh, that's super cool, man. Well, I look forward to the Bestall wedding 2027 presented by Pim's #1 cup.
Sponsored by Dr. Squatch.
It is a joyous occasion, and to celebrate, we're doing a show about haunted prisons, is what the script says. Okay, haunted prisons it is.
It's one of the few experiences of my life I've yet to have. I've never stayed in a prison. Stayed in a police cell, but never a prison.
Also an experience I have thus far managed to avoid. But the folks in these stories, by and large, are people who have experienced things while working in prisons. Although there are, I managed to find some small little snippets of stories from former inmates who have shared some of their experiences. Not much. There's not a ton of that out there that I could find, or at least that I found before this. But there is some stuff, and we also have a little bit of a story, just a tiny snippet of a story from Lima, Peru.
Oh.
And a hotel built on the site of a prison that was once called El Panoptico. So I am very much looking forward to that. But before we get to the stories about haunted prisons, we got to thank our patrons.
This one's for the patrons.
Patrons, we could not do what we do without you. So thank you. Thank you, thank you. For real, guys. Every single person who downloads the Ghost Story Guys, you help make us who we are. But subscribers are truly the ones who allow us to continue. You pay my bills, you pay some of Paul's bills, and you pay for all the various shit we need to keep this big old machine going.
I've got a wedding to pay for.
That's it. Paul has a wedding to pay for.
Sign up.
And the Russian gangsters I was drinking cocktails with the other night, they have very expensive taste. So I got to keep up with the Joneskos or whatever you want to call them. But yes, anyways, no, really, we appreciate everyone who listens to the show, but subscribers are very near and dear to our hearts. And you can subscribe on Patreon, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, all kinds of great places. And we appreciate everyone who does. But for now, we'd like to thank our latest subscribers. They are
Kissing Kate Barlow,
John Sessa,
Kenneth Matheson,
and Giodegard Odile. I was wondering how I would handle that one. I did okay. Odile?
I hope that's not an Arsenal reference.
Now I hope it is.
I'd be very disappointed if it is.
Subscribers get all kinds of cool stuff. You get bonus episodes, you get bonus conversations between me and Paul, paranormal articles read by me. You also get access to our monthly live show AMA and all kinds of other cool stuff. And you can find all of that by clicking the link in the show notes or by heading to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys or signing up to Ghost Story Guys Premium via Apple Podcasts or YouTube. Hey there, folks. So coming in at the end of the episode with a quick heads up, this episode, because it talks about prisons, and there are a number of very unpleasant things that happen in prison or happen because of prison, or that happen to get you put in prison, there are a number of violent moments coming up, both in stories and in the conversations. Nothing, I think, that is gratuitous. It's all germane to the conversation, but it is there. So if you are very sensitive to those topics, I would suggest you keep that skip 15 seconds ahead button handy. Back to Past Paul and Past Bren as we head out of the A segment. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Tales of Haunting in Lockup.
Screaming. So a few years ago, I worked in a military prison. Our hours were 24-hour shifts that consisted of shared downtime, which is sleeping, between the shifts. One of you stays awake, the other one sleeps, and then you switch halfway through the night. I've been working at this prison for a while by this point, and I was currently working in our special quarters. Our SQ was just a long loop with all the cells on the inside of the loop. Every 15 minutes, I'd have to do the health and comfort check and basically walk by each cell, making sure that the inmates were alive and healthy. Every cell had a security light, so even at night time, the cells are never truly black so we can see inside. One specific inmate I remember was in special quarters because he was mentally not all there. His favourite thing to do was draw, scream all day, pee outside the cell, and sleep. One day, we had to do a cell extraction on him because he was clawing at his gums with his fingernails and using the blood from them to draw symbols all over his cell wall. Medical were looking at him on the spot while I was going through his cell to check for contraband. Looking through his drawings, he'd always make childlike sketches of him playing games with his brother, and then a creepy shadow silhouette of a person. His name was all over his drawing of himself, his brother's over his, and the dark one over the shadowy figure, which is cheesy, I know. While looking through these drawings, he looked at me and said, "He doesn't like you being in there." I suddenly felt the hair raise on my arms and I walked right out. Keep in mind, I'm regularly told this weird stuff by inmates and it never bothers any seasoned officer, except this one time. Fast forward a couple of weeks. It's probably around 2 a.m. and I'm awake while my partner's sleeping. During my every 15-minute check, I noticed every cell security light was on as normal, otherwise I'd have to write a report about it. I was sitting in the little cell we use for our food for the day eating, when all of a sudden I heard this extremely loud screaming. I couldn't make out what the screaming was or what even language it was, but my arm hairs raised again and I ran to find the source. Every single inmate was sound asleep, but what caught my attention was that the strange inmate security light was out. There's no way they'd be able to mess with the lights the way they were installed. I quickly yelled to the other officers in the other bays that if they'd heard the screaming, thinking maybe it had come from one of their bays, and not one of the other officers had heard anything. I was the only one that did. Since that day, I always requested to be never posted there again, even though it was one of the most sought-after posts.
And as a follow-up to that, I went and found another brief account from someone in a similar situation, and they said, CO here, my prison used to be a state mental hospital. We have to do rounds in the basement alone. It's just long hallways and empty rooms. Most of the lights are off. I don't believe in ghosts, but I'm definitely not alone down there. And this is from an inmate. My cell was next door to where, in a military prison, my cell was next door to where they used to hang people when I first got locked up. I swear I used to hear noises coming from what was supposed to be an empty room pretty often during the night. And Paul, there is a, if I'm not mistaken, is it Shepton Mallet in the UK is a military prison that's said to be haunted?
Former military prison. Yeah, we've got several, and Shepton is one of the three main haunted former prisons in the UK. We've got Shepton Mallet, Derby Jail, and Bodmin.
Oh, okay. So what do you know about Shepton Mallet?
Shepton Mallet, obviously, like you say, was a former military prison. And so I think one of the most well-known hauntings attached to it was one of the former inmates broke out of his cell, got on the roof, and threw himself off. Oh. And allegedly, you can occasionally hear his frantic voice shouting, "Get back! Get back!" as people were trying to rescue him off the roof before he threw himself off.
Oh, Jesus.
It's been quite a stressful time for that particular venue, because I know there were some issues, because it's got regular ghost hauntings. The big three, Derby, Bodmin and Shepton, you can visit regularly. Depending on who owns it, you can either get a good deal or you can get an eye-watering price, as certain venues have sort of cottoned on to paranormal tourism to an extent that it's just ridiculous. Of course,
yeah.
You know, if you're paying £400 to spend the night somewhere, then I'm sorry. There's far better things you can do for £400, in my opinion. Anyway, and so Shepton's probably the one where it's probably the best recorded and most consistent with a variety of things. I think it's also got the usual doors opening and closing and footsteps being heard and keys rattling and things like that. So yeah, Shepton Mallet's certainly up there. But yeah, it had a bit of a traumatic thing. It was going to be sorted out and things were happening, and then somebody said they were going to sell it, so it shut with no notice. Things were cancelled, and it seems that it's under new ownership and it's gone back to what it was. So, but it was a bit touch and go for a while, and people thought they might lose it permanently or it would get redeveloped or something. Because this is the other strange thing. Jails in this country these are all old jails. British prisons are crap anyway. Some of them are some of the most terrifyingly badly maintained locations in the country. They're atrocious, and it's a powder keg. And Britain's prison population is at bursting point right now.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't realize you guys had such a large inmate population. I know that's sort of a thing people talk about America, but I didn't realize that was also a British thing.
Compared to some places, it's not that large. I mean, it's just under 100,000, but it's double what it was 30 years ago.
That's mad.
And you've got some very, very dangerous. I mean, there are 50 inmates in this country that have whole of life terms, which means they are not eligible for parole under any circumstances.
Oh, okay.
And then obviously you've got varying levels of security up and down the country, and you've got secure units. Obviously the most famous is Broadmoor, which has seen some of the worst criminals in Britain spend some time there, which I find one of the strange things, that you will have serial killers and murderers and rapists and poisoners and people like that all sort of just hanging out in the same place.
I think I've been to some nightclubs like that, honestly.
We've all spent times in places like that. I can remember a couple of places I've been in the past where I'd have probably been better off getting in the mess hall in a prison, to be fair. Probably safer.
You're not wrong.
So yeah, they're the main three really, and they're famous or notorious for one reason or another. Bodmin is a prime example, because that's famously the scene of where Derek Okora was caught out faking.
Oh, that's where it was. I for some reason I never made the connection. I remember the incident, but not where it happened. And yeah, of course, for our listeners who don't know, Derek Okora, of course, famous, infamous, I suppose, UK psychic, now passed, and he was fed some bad information on, it was Most Haunted, wasn't it?
Yes, he was stitched up. They didn't believe that he was... I mean, it took him 5 series to get their heads around it. So make of that what you will, listeners. A cynic may say that clearly that it was done for malicious reasons because, this is a long time after Mary Loves Dick and all that. But yeah, he basically got stitched up and was told about a certain person that never existed, and then later in the investigation he channeled Creed Kafer, which of course is an anagram of Derek Faker.
Oof. That's like channeling Loser Says What? What?
Sphincter says what?
Yeah, Sphincter says what? I'm getting a message from I'm a dildo.
Mary really loves dick.
One of the best moments in paranormal television, beyond compare.
Mary, she seems very fond of dick. Was the final thing he says in that scene, without even a glimmer of a smile on his face. It's incredible. It's some of the best stone-faced strangeness I've ever seen.
It always reminds me of this thing that happened with one of my aunts, and this is back when I was maybe 13 or 14. And we're at a family dinner, Sunday family dinner. This is a very staid side of the family, the side that they do not make lewd comments. It is not done. But they were talking about old photographs. And my one aunt, who was up visiting from another town, she said, "Oh, well, I keep all my photographs in my box." And everyone went, "Oh." And she was, yeah. If I find them, I just stuff it in my box. I've got so much stuff, so many photos in my box. And it's the one time my grandfather and my grandmother was one of the most humorless fucking person you can possibly imagine. She started cracking up. And then one of those poor bastards had to take that other aunt into the next room and explain to her why everyone was laughing about her stuffing things into her box. I don't envy whoever it was. I don't remember who it was anymore, but I don't envy them having to have that conversation. Because I like, these people are not, they're not innocents. They like to pretend, but all the same, having to tell your sainted aunt, look, it kind of sounds like, fill in the blanks here. She came back in the room. She did not look happy.
Probably because she realizes what she's got in her box.
How am I going to get this shit out of here?
It's like sometimes we have to help out at Christmas at work doing deliveries and stuff. And one of the lads was doing parcel deliveries and he sent us all a message saying, "I'm really sorry. Somebody's just smashed me back doors in." And so we were just laughing, going, "Should you be doing that while she's supposed to be working?" And he didn't get it.
Oh, no.
He didn't get it at all until somebody pointed out what it meant. And then he was like, "Oh, you dirty bastards." That's the kind of relationship you've got with your missus. I see. That's all right, son. It's all right. We're all open-minded here, mate.
Good for you. Ask your parents, kids. They'll never let you listen to the Ghost Story Guys again. It's moments like this when I do think about people saying, "Oh yeah, well, we let your kids listen." I think, don't. Look, I love it, but don't.
How can we forget that small child that asked us for our autographs at Parameet?
Oh yeah.
Sorry to everybody in Coventry.
I'd say mea culpa, but we're just going to do something like that again. The shape. Firstly, I'm 24, and I am a prison guard in a federal correctional facility somewhere in North America. I usually work night shifts, and in fact, I've adjusted quite well. I maintain a healthy routine and diet, and I exercise regularly and routinely get 7+ hours of sleep during the day, to give you a picture of my mental health. Also, I have experienced some strange paranormal things in my life before, but I remain skeptical. Anyways, essentially one night a little bit ago, I was working on the maximum security unit of our correctional facility. It was relatively early in the morning, and my partner had gone up to do their own thing for a while before our obligations. Seeing as this is pretty normal, I threw my feet up on the desk of the control post and began reading my book to kill some time. The way I was facing, I could see the monitors over my book in case something happened. That way I could see it. Now, anyone who works down there knows that weird things happen regularly. Shadows moving, things moving on the cameras, strange sounds, but most of us chalk it up to the fact that it's generally late at night, 3 to 4 in the morning, and we've been up since 3 to 4 p.m. the following day, and we just ignore it. This time, while I'm reading my book, I see movement on one of the cameras. I check all the cells, everything's good. I look back and there's movement on a different camera, and then a different one. Every time I look, something's happening on a different one. When I say movement, I mean I can see a figure moving, or I can see things on a table or countertop moving, or so on. After probably only 30 seconds, it felt like forever. Everything sort of stopped. I took a deep breath and told myself it was probably just my imagination and I shouldn't worry about it. So I leaned back, threw my feet back up, and went back to my book. Here's where things get really creepy. As I was reading my book, a large, completely black figure appeared outside my control post in the exact spot a person would be if they needed to communicate with me from outside. There's actually a large silver mouthpiece that we use to communicate when the control post has to be secured during the day. This figure looms there for probably no more than a second or two, and then disappears. This figure was quite large. Again, I just sort of sat back and tried not to think about it. Although I'll admit that my nerves were a little rattled. Anyways, my partner came back down to grab his things before his obligation took him back up to the main part of the correctional facility. He sat down and we talked for a minute, and I told him what I'd experienced. We both laughed and said it was probably nothing. In fact, he actually said, "If there was a ghost here right now, he'd tickle my balls." We both laughed some more, and he told me to stop being a pussy. Oh, sounds like a real gem, this guy. I laughed some more and convinced myself that I was just abnormally tired and had been hearing things. He left to do his thing, and as I was letting off of the maximum security unit, one of the female inmates on our segregation range began screaming incoherently. She pressed her emergency only button. I radioed my friend to come back down so that one of us could go check. He immediately came back down and asked me what the hell was going on. I told him I had no idea. She just started screaming at the top of her lungs as soon as he left. He decided to go check on her, took the disable key for the alarm, and proceeded to her door. Being as the segregation range is right alongside the control post, I stood by the door to listen when she was screaming. And this is more or less along the lines of her ranting. She was saying, "You've got to fucking help me. He's trying to kill me. Oh God, he's trying to kill me. Help me, please." At this point, she was crying hysterically and banging on the door. She actually hurt herself trying to bust the gigantic steel door open. My friend turned to me, slightly pale, and we both shrugged our shoulders, not really sure what was going on. He calmly explained to her that she's been locked up for days and that the institution's been locked down since the previous evening and no one had gotten in and she was safe and no one could hurt her. She continued to scream and cry hysterically and said, "You idiot, you don't fucking understand. It's my husband. My husband is here and he's trying to kill me. Please fucking help me. Let me out of here. He's right behind you. He's right behind you." At this point, my friend was frozen in raw animal terror. Standing by the door, I could see that there was no one behind him, but a tangible presence was definitely felt by all of us on that range. He later told me he was so scared that even though he knew no one was there, he felt like there was, and he could not make himself turn around. After some talking, we eventually got her to calm down. She eventually explained that every so often when she's been a bitch, her own words, not mine, that her husband comes and haunts her and abuses her like he used to. She says it starts with nightmares and eventually leads to his presence, wherever she is. I told her we would get the psychology and healthcare teams to see her as soon as they were in for work. She begged me to see if they were in now, and I agreed to call, but told her I couldn't promise anything. I phoned healthcare, and of course, no one picked up, so I hung up before the answering machine kicked in. She eventually went back to sleep, my friend went on with his business, and I was stuck alone in the control post for the next 30 minutes. Nothing else happened while I was there, and I was thankful for that. I told my coworkers who'd come in for the day shift what had happened, and no one could really believe me, but they could see I was legitimately shaken up by it, and know that I'm not the kind of person who would lie or make up a story of this kind. I finally got relieved and headed home for an unsettling sleep. Now, the next two details are going to sound made up, kind of like the cherry on top, but I assure you they actually happened. First, my friend did some research on this particular person, and it turns out that she'd previously killed her husband as he was violent and abusive. He was approximately 6'7" and about 275 pounds. The creepiest thing about this was that, and maybe I'm extrapolating, but that more or less describes the scale of the black shape I'd seen outside of the control post. Second, I guess right after I'd left, about the time the rest of the institution's staff came in for their shifts, my coworker got a call from healthcare who sounded a little strange. They asked if anyone had called and left a message. My coworkers told them that I'd called about an hour and a half before anyone got there, but hung up without leaving a message. They said that was extremely strange because they did get a message at about 5:30 when I called, and all they could hear were two people screaming. And yeah, Paul, again, I'm not sad that I've never had a career in the correctional industry, because the shit like this is not for me.
No, that does not sound like the kind of wing you want to be working on late at night.
Could you imagine? Hard fucking pass.
No. I mean, there's one of the prisons over here, HMP Shrewsbury, I think it is, which is still an active prison, is notorious for one particular wing being full of very strange feelings and people seeing shapes and shadows lurking about and people hearing screaming and stuff. So, yeah, no thanks. Shrewsbury's hilarious as well because they had a public, because obviously capital punishment was banned in the UK in 1961 here. And so their former execution room, where they used to hang people, when they decided not to do it in public anymore and brought them, just killed them in jail instead. When they stopped executions in the UK, they turned their execution room into a group therapy room.
Oh, I guess I respect the commitment to turning things around, but Jesus, that's grim.
Yes. Yeah. Never waste space in a prison.
No, I guess not. I found this other just little bit of a thing. And this person said, I work in the oldest prison in my state. In fact, it was a prison before my state was even a state. I frequently use the staff gym before roll call and have to blast the radio, which only gets static, so I don't have to hear doors closing and keys jingling in a building where I know I'm the only person in. We've had several hundred executions happen at this facility since the 1800s. Before this job, I was firm on not believing in paranormal stuff. Now it happens so frequently, it's starting to become a daily norm, which is, again, just a crazy statement. Like, no, the world is what it is. Who gives a shit? You're born, you die, the end. And now all of a sudden, after working in a prison, you think, well, I guess I need to reevaluate my stance on these things.
I'm not surprised, and anybody that's watched any horror film from the 1980s will know that executions are not the end of nasty characters who can suddenly turn themselves into electricity.
I was going to say, we all know the story of that documentary about Horace Pinker.
It's that Shocker.
Shocker.
Shocker's that one, isn't it? And Trick or Treat's similar, but obviously he dies on stage, not in prison, and then comes back through backward playing records, of course. That easy gateway to Satan.
There's House 3.
Yes. Yeah.
Prison. Actually, folks, if you can track down Prison in Canada, it's not streaming anywhere, but someone has put up a low-res copy on YouTube. But that was the job that got Rennie Harlan Nightmare on Elm Street 4. And about, it's going to shock you, so sit down. It's about prison. But it's got a lot of...
It influenced Gerard Butler's most recent film, which made people burst out laughing when they saw the trailer in the cinema.
Which one was that?
Plane.
Oh, Plane is a ton of fun. I'm not going to say it's a good movie, but it's a lot of fun. And I seriously think the sequel's being called Boat.
Sub.
I'll watch it. If it's greasy Jerry Butler, late stage Jerry Butler doing shit, I'll watch it. I'm just there. I'm there opening night. As long as it's not end of the world shit. I couldn't watch Greenland. Apparently Greenland's actually pretty good. I just can't do apocalyptic shit anymore. But if it's Jerry, fighting corrupt cops, or who cares? Terrorists, tourists, protecting the president. I think there's another one of those coming as well.
Yeah. What's fallen now?
My resistance to the powers of Jerry Butler.
Yeah, 300 seems a long, long time ago, doesn't it?
It does. But at the same time, I'm like, maybe that's for the best. Because I feel like the Jerry Butler in, what's that movie called? The one with it's the cop movie. It's like Heat for like Duplo.
Band of Thieves?
Yeah, Den of Thieves. The Jerry Butler in that, where he's eating a greasy donut with his big meat claws, that feels like the real him. I feel like buff Jerry Butler, that was always a put on. That was always like, this is what the Hollywood machine demands. But like unshaven, looks like he hasn't showered in a day or two, hands covered with powdered sugar and jam from a donut. I feel like that's the real man. And I feel like we're just now getting to the core of that.
Weren't most of it in 300 CGI anyway?
I think just the backgrounds. I don't think the.
I think they did some muscle work as well.
Could very well be. That helps me feel better about myself. So, all fake muscles. That's what I say.
Not to the extent of Beowulf, but
I'm quite sure I don't know what you mean.
I know Ray Winston does not look like that.
Or Nick Cage's abs in Ghost Rider. I wish I could have someone CG some abs for me just all the time. Like my kitchen. Actually, sometimes I'll talk to Nick in the morning or after work or whatever, and if I don't have a shirt on, the light coming from the kitchen window hits me at just such an angle that it actually looks, if you've been hit in the head recently, it looks like I have muscular definition. And I wish every interaction I have could take place in the lighting from that window, because I look reasonably close to a human being, and it's actually quite nice. So I just got to figure out some way to mimic that, or again, if I can CG that, a la Nick Cage or Jerry.
Okay, when you find the secret, let me know.
Done deal. The pact is made.
Speaking in tongues. I've worked as a correctional officer for a long time. I've worked at facilities in Texas and in Michigan. The oldest prison I've ever worked at just recently started to close in Michigan, and it got me thinking about all the paranormal experiences I've had there and in the other prisons I've worked at. I'd like to share with you all some of the more notable paranormal experiences that I've had whilst working in these prisons. First off, I just want to say that I've never really believed in ghosts before I started working as a correctional officer. I began working in Texas as an intake facility. I worked the night shift, 12 hours, 6 p.m. till 6 a.m. The first experience I ever had was working on a lower security housing unit. When finishing a round, I was chatting with my partner, and I heard a loud banging sound, and it was like 3 a.m. at this point. No prisoners should be out of their bunks. And I asked my partner if they knew what the banging was. They, being an older officer, told me bluntly that the unit we were working in was haunted. They told me that the sound was coming from a cell door in a hallway not directly visible from the officer's station, and a prisoner had allegedly choked to death in that cell, they said. I didn't really believe in that kind of thing. Ghosts, I mean. So I decided to go and look at this door. The banging increased in volume as I got closer to the door, and when I got there, I could see that the door itself was visibly shaking, as if someone was pounding on it. There was absolutely nothing that could have been causing the door to shake like that, and I was at a loss for words. Another experience I had was at the same facility, but in a different housing unit. It was once again around 2 a.m, and I was sitting inside the officer station watching the cameras and talking to my partner. I looked at one of the cameras and clearly saw a prisoner sitting at a table in the day room. I turned my head physically to look into the day room, and no one was sitting at that table. No one was supposed to be out of bed yet, so I asked my partner to go check it out. I rolled back the time on the camera to see if I could see where the prisoner might have gone, but instead, I watched as the figure on the camera slowly faded away before vanishing completely. My partner came back into the officer station and we both watched this video over and over. Later on that same night, during one of my rounds, I noticed a wet floor sign that had got left out, so I picked it up and returned it to the porter closet. As I got back to the officer station and looked back to where the porter closet was, once again the same wet floor sign was now left out. I asked my partner if they were playing a joke on me or something, because I know I've just put the sign away, but my partner denied doing anything with it. I went back out and I made sure I put that sign back in the closet before locking the door. Well, when I got back to the officer station and looked back, and you won't believe it, but that goddamn wet floor sign was right there in the open again. My partner and I were both watching this wet floor sign now. It started to tip over on one end very slowly, 2 of its legs off the ground, and then just slammed itself into the ground. It then proceeded to slide quickly up the hallway and then back to the in front of the closet door before ceasing all movement. God. My partner and I refused to come out of the officer station for the rest of the night because we were scared shitless, and I don't blame them. One more notable one from Texas. I was working in an ad-seg unit, really high security for prisoners that get in fights and cause a lot of problems repeatedly. we had a prisoner who was sitting in one of our close observation cells. These cells are usually used for people who threaten to harm themselves. In summertime, prisoners will sometimes say they're suicidal to get put in one of these cells because they're a lot cooler and far nearer the air conditioning vents that the normal housing units don't have. The prisoner told me that this was what they were doing, and they just didn't want to cause any problems. Later on that night, one of my partners and I were watching cameras, when all of a sudden we saw a shadow moving across the floor. Eventually it came to the close observation cell and disappeared under the door. This is where it gets a little crazy. I did a round and checked on the close observation cell. The prisoner was pacing in the cell. I asked them if they were okay, and the prisoner told me that something just didn't feel right. They were hearing voices that weren't there. I tried to calm them down, and eventually they did, laying on the bed. Later on, my partner called for assistance because that same prisoner had bitten the skin off their own wrists, causing them to bleed, held them above their head, and allegedly began to speak in tongues.
God damn. I actually think that has some of the most, crazy, striking imagery we've had recently on the show.
As with anything, I've said this before and I'll say it again. When normal, everyday objects start acting really strangely, I think they're far more terrifying than seeing a shape or a figure.
Oh, yeah, because that just completely upends your notion of what's real and accepted.
Yeah, but it also it just makes you think, well, what's going on here? Why is it? Has it got a sense of humour? I mean, if they've got a wet floor sign and it's like sliding about, with woo, woo, ha ha, enjoying that, living people, ha ha ha. So yeah, that's freaky, isn't it?
Oh, it's bad.
Yeah, I remember hearing a case. I'm not sure where I heard it, and it was a case about a prison in the US where somebody basically started ranting in tongues for no reason, and he was a notorious serial killer who was executed. I've forgotten what he was, but essentially it's a horrific crime. He basically ate two girls.
Good God.
And then claimed he basically had a blackout and said he couldn't remember what he'd done. But if he'd done what they said he'd done, he deserved to die. And he was executed. Yeah. But whilst he was being kept in his cells, they were saying he would often at night speak in tongues and there's just no idea what was going on. And he was executed really quickly, like super quick.
Oh, fascinating.
Within like a couple of weeks. But yeah, it's a horrific crime. He was discovered on the bodies and he'd been eating them with his bare teeth.
Good Lord. Man, I'm going to have to put a fucking content warning on this one. It's interesting stuff. It's just unexpectedly gruesome.
I have those depths sometimes.
This is true. One of the many things I appreciate about you.
Thank you. It's chilling. It's, because that's a heinous crime of itself before you add the strange babbling in unknown language.
Yeah. No, that's dark. Slightly less dark than that, although reasonably dark. I found an article in the Austin American Statesman. It's from Friday, October 29th, 1999, and it is another Texas story. Now, the full article is quite long, so I'm only going to read part of it here. Patrons will actually get the full article, but it is called Tales from the Cell Block. Eerie scenes, sounds fuel Huntsville Prison's ghost lore. And this is the East Texas Penitentiary at Huntsville. And so I'm just going to read the opening of the article. And again, patrons will get the full thing. This is by Mike Ward. Huntsville. Almost from the day he started working in Texas's oldest prison, Billy Ray Holmes heard the stories. The ones about the footsteps heard clomping up wooden stairs at night, or about the sound of cell doors slamming shut when none were open, the unexplained cries of anguish. But I didn't believe any of them, said Holmes, 36, not even the one his father, also a correctional officer, told him about the night a steel trap door in a guard tower rattled wildly, even though no one was near it. His views changed in May 1990 while he was working the graveyard shift in the creaky old South Cell House, where many of the spooky stories were born. That night he looked up from paperwork to see a dark figure moving down the narrow walkway outside a row of cells. A convict out of his cell, Holmes recalls thinking at first. But whatever it was came out of the wall, right through the wall, and went into a cell, he said. I went right down to that cell to see who it was. There was just one mate in there. He said, yes, sir, I saw it too. It came right through here, went right through the back wall. Right through it. And again, that is just part of the article, but Texas prisons, a real bad place to be for a lot of reasons, turns out.
Well, I'm not surprised. Some of these maximum security prisons, you only have to look at some of the inmates that have been executed in some of these establishments. And I'd be amazed if they weren't haunted.
That is true. Do you have any specific examples?
Bundy, Gacy.
Oh, of course.
I mean, you've got I'm trying to think of the really Sacramento vampire, Richard
I don't know that
Chase. He was a cannibal and a necrophile.
Good Lord.
He was one of those that he'd been institutionalized and then they thought he was fine, but he wasn't. I'm not sure how many people, but he would kill and eat people in and around. I mean, California in the 1970s sounds fucking terrifying. You know, because you've got all these nutters just running about. I mean, what on earth was in the water in California in the 1970s? You've got Bundy, you've got the Hillside Stranglers, you've got Zodiac, you've got the Doodler, you've got the Yuba County Five disappearing up the coast. You've got this nutter, Richard Chase, running about. You've got that other couple, where strangely enough, one of the women involved was also called Bundy. And he was basically chopping people's heads off and they were just murdering people, this couple. They were the freeway killers. I mean, this is all in the 1970s. And Chase was at the end of it. And he was quite clearly given the death penalty. But I think he'd been sort of hoarding the antipsychotic, antidepressant drugs they'd given him. And he basically took 6 months worth at once and died. But he started telling people that he thought that the prison guards were in league with the Nazis and they were trying to kill him because he knew the truth.
Folks, consider this a PSA from Uncle Brent. If you start thinking, they're coming for me because I know the truth, seek help. That is never a good sign, because I'm going to tell you, 90% of the time, you are not Woodward and Bernstein. You are, in fact, having a psychotic break.
Or you're in Invasions of the Body Snatchers.
Well, okay, or that, yeah. So 90% psychotic break, 5% Body Snatchers, 5% Woodward and Bernstein.
You never know.
And just quickly, you mentioned the Nazis. Always a favorite whipping boy of the show. Speaking of...
I wondered where we were going there. It's very difficult. I often wonder. I'm glad my library's in a specific room now, because I have lots of books about the Second World War, including books about Hitler and the Nazis, because that was my history A-level specialty, was the rise of Nazism and the obsession with the occult. So I have several books all about the Third Reich. I don't own Mein Kampf.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. I've got proper historical textbooks written by people who aren't Nazis. Okay? But
okay.
I've got more than somebody who isn't a Nazi probably would think is healthy, but I just find it fascinating, that whole period of the period between the end of the First World War and the start of the Second World War, and how it all came about and what was going on. It's just fascinating.
It is, yeah, absolutely. And as I bring it up briefly because when I was looking for stuff about military prison, I found a thread of soldiers talking about bases where they had heard stories or had strange experiences. And one of them, and you also mentioned Dahmer, one of them is the military U.S. Army garrison bomb holder. It is in Germany, and it was a former Nazi base. And apparently that is very haunted. It's, according to one of the posters, the I don't know, folks, I don't know what this means, so I'm sure some of our military folks can help us out. 16th STTB headquarters building. It has a creepy feeling late at night, and a number of people checked in and said, yeah, that is very much the case. So I thought that was kind of interesting. You've got a nice little nexus of ghosts, Nazis, and a serial killer. All right, we are going to take a quick break for some ads, and we'll be right back with the next story. All right, welcome back. So as a quick break from the format, I wanted to share something I found that I mentioned at the top of the show, and it's not a story. I don't have like a sort of a cohesive narrative the way we usually do. But when I was doing some research earlier today, I found this little tiny piece in the Montana Billings Gazette dated Monday, December 20th, 1971. And it's literally just this little tiny paragraph. And the headline is Prison Ghosts. and it's from the Associated Press. It says, Lima, Peru. A prison once stood on the site of a hotel under construction in Lima, and workers, who say the prisoners' ghosts still roam the land, convinced the contractor to install lights and recorded music to drive away the spirits. So I read that and I thought, okay, well, I got to know more. So I went all through newspapers.com and I found zip on this place. So I went to the Intertrons. And my Spanish is rusty, but I managed to find that this is the Lima Sheraton in Lima, Peru. It's got a different name now, but it was the Lima Sheraton. And it was built on the site of a prison they called El Panoptico. And of course, Panopticon is, as I'm sure you know, Paul, is a particular design of a prison where the idea is that you are always under surveillance. It's I think a radial, a radial-based prison or something like that, where there's like a central tower and the cells radiate out from that. So yeah, the idea that you are constantly under surveillance. And so I tried to find a little bit more information, and I've got a brief history here of the Sheraton. This is from Peru 21. It's a newspaper in Lima. I ran this through Translate, so if it doesn't make a lot of sense, forgive me. But this is just a little bit of history of the building. And this is credited to Alvaro Treneman. The iconic Sheraton Hotel, which has become a key player in our capital, has officially changed its name to Sheraton Lima Historic Center in order to strengthen the ties that this building has with the historic center of Lima. With 49 years of history since it opened its doors to the public on March 1st, 1973, the Sheraton has become one of the most recognized buildings by the people of Lima and has witnessed great political and cultural changes, mainly due to its location in a privileged area of the historic center of Lima on the Paseo de los Heros Navales in front of the Palace of Justice. The building caught everyone's attention from the start of its construction, as it was the first hotel of a foreign chain in the country and the first five-star hotel. The luxury was evident. An open-air swimming pool, a hall full of mirrors, red carpets, and crystal-clear fountains were part of a massive 20 floors and 431 rooms. Everything was amazing at that time. Now, we don't need to know about all the famous guests. Most of it's not going to make sense because we don't really know the culture of Peru, or I don't at least. However, when you scroll down to macabre stories, this is where it starts to run into a little more our territory. And I'm going to say, folks, this is another probably... maybe it's going to be violent in places, so heads up if you're sensitive to these kinds of descriptions. Keep your fingers near the skip 15 seconds ahead button. Under macabre stories, Treneman says, not all the memories were glorious and emblematic, as the past of the place where the hotel was built brought with it the first macabre stories that began to be rumored among the people of Lima. It turns out that the land where the Sheraton and the Civic Center were built was also once the site of the Lima Penitentiary, also known as El Panoptico. It was open from 1862 to 1961, a prison built during the time of President Ramon Castilla and which did not have a good reputation. During the years of construction of the hotel, there were rumors that after midnight the ghosts of those executed in the now defunct penitentiary would appear between the columns. The murder of Marita Alpaca is undoubtedly considered by many to be the most serious incident that occurred at the Sheraton facilities and which remains etched in the memory of all Peruvians. In the early hours of August 19th, 1990, guests and employees of the famous Sheraton Hotel came across a terrible scene. The naked body of a woman lay at the edge of the pool on the building's outdoor terrace. The body of Marita Alpaca, 33, was recognized by her mother after seeing the photographs, and the first theories about her death pointed to suicide. However, after further investigation, it was concluded that the young woman had been thrown from the 19th floor. The main suspect in the murder was a wealthy banker Leandro Reaño Cabreos, Marita's partner and with whom she had spent the night at the hotel. The case became darker because the main suspect used his power and money to get away with it, but after complaints from Marita's mother, who revealed that she was pregnant, the body was exhumed to reveal the surprise that her uterus had been removed. In 1995, Reaño was sentenced to 7 years in prison for Marita's murder, which seems very low, in addition to paying 200,000 soles in reparation to Corina Ra, Marita's mother. However, he was released in 1998 and only paid 120,000. I feel like that's all not enough regardless. And so that gives you a little bit of history into the Lima Historic Center Hotel. But I did find one other note. And this is, again, this is translated, so it's going to be a little bit rough. But I managed to find a Spanish language Facebook group where people shared their memories of that prison. Now, This is the only one I found that was kind of relevant to our uses. A lot of the stories are pretty awful. But this one says, a friend of mine tells me that she was one of the guards of the Lima Tower and had to quit. This person was working at dawn and said that at rest time, other colleagues would sleep in the storage room in the basement, and they never got to sleep because they would hear screams, noises, moans, and dragging of chains. And if you did fall asleep, the nightmares would be bad enough, they would wake you up. The aura of the place was strong, burdensome, and traumatizing. So I thought that was fascinating, man, because it's just, I had never heard of this place. Did you?
No, not at all.
Yeah. And so if not for a single mention in a Billings, Montana newspaper in 1971, I never would have even heard of this place. But it was a prison, is now a hotel, and has some mojo going on, although apparently they're not really keen on talking about it, which I suppose I can't blame them.
Yeah, it's not even the most notorious prison in Peru.
No kidding. What's the most notorious prison in Peru?
There is another one that is infamous. San Juan de la Gigancho.
Okay.
That's the most notorious prison in Peru.
Interesting. And that one's still open?
Yes. It's the largest prison in Peru as well. I mean, it's not as big as the terrifyingly large Angola prison in Louisiana.
Yes. We actually, I think, had a story from Angola on the original prison episode.
That prison's bigger than Manhattan.
Holy shit, I had no idea.
And it's very different to a lot of prisons because the prisoners live in houses.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
It's self-sufficient. They grow crops there and all sorts. So basically everybody gets jobs and you live in houses and you can get promoted up and down the facility depending on your behaviour, and you get better houses if you're better behaved.
So just before we move on, I still have the original script for episode 77, Haunted Prisons, whatever it was called. And so this is the little bit about Angola. I worked at Angola from March 1993 to March 2000. I believe several areas of the prison are haunted. You can actually hear prisoners screaming, chains rattling, and that's in an old empty cell block that's not used anymore. I also know that the lethal injection room is definitely haunted. The building that once served as a woman's dormitory up till the 60s now houses newly hired officers that are participating in their initial job training. Staff have reported immense feelings of depression and sadness in this dormitory. Shadow people have also been sighted.
Yes, I'm not surprised. One of the most notorious incidents in Angola prison history was that 31 inmates sliced their own Achilles tendons to get attention to the poor conditions they were living in the 1930s.
Good Lord. Oh God. Yeah, this one's having a big old content warning on it. God damn. Just the thought of that fucks me up.
Yeah, because they cut the budget and basically people were living in shit.
Wow. That's commitment.
Well, as someone that's worked with the rehabilitation offenders, the improvement in the conditions of prisoners whilst in custody is a disgrace in most learned countries in the world. And I think the sooner we realise the ramifications of shit conditions in prisons, we will suddenly realise that perhaps if we dealt with these kind of issues a lot better, people would be better prepared. I mean, over here, people try to get sentenced for longer sentences because they don't get specialised help or training if they're not in for long enough.
We have a similar issue here, yeah.
And so people will get out, reoffend, and go back in knowing they'll get a longer sentence, but they'll learn a trade.
Right.
I mean, it's just balmy.
Yeah, it's bad, man. It's bad. We're sadly at this point in society, and I think we've always been here to a certain degree, but where everyone gets really horny for this idea of brutalizing criminals, where they think that's, fear and pain or how you rule the people. And that has never been true. Doesn't
work. You can't treat people like that and then release them and expect them to be, well-adjusted members of society for what regardless. And often people go in with pretty minor crimes and end up becoming hardened criminals because of the overcrowding and prison populations, and they end up learning things that they probably would not have had. And as with anything, poverty leads to crime leads to being sent to jail, and it's a vicious, never-ending cycle of despair for a lot of those people, regardless.
That's exactly it. I feel like one of us should make a fart joke just to bring things back up.
Condemned. When I started working at prisons in Michigan, I worked at a prison that was built way back in 1877 and is one of the oldest prisons still operating in all of the United States. There were so many small experiences that I've had here. Doors would slam, you'd hear voices, you'd get cold chills. The first real notable experience I had was around Christmas time on my third shift in the oldest unit on the facility. Usually we don't have prisoners there, but we had opened the unit to separate prisoners during the pandemic. I didn't have a partner due to how short-staffed we were, so one of the other officers set up a TV for me to keep me entertained. If I was going to be far away from all the other units, then this was the way to do it. I did rounds for most of the night and watched TV in between them. At some point during this shift, I began to hear a banging noise from a door that leads to a long hallway. At the end of this hallway is an even older, condemned part of the prison. I opened the door and took a look down that hallway. A cold breeze hit me, and the hairs on my arm all stood on end. Thoroughly creeped out, I closed the door and went back towards the TV again. Then the TV started rapidly flipping through channels before stopping on static. One day on another third shift, my co-worker and I were in working positions that allowed us to have a lot of free time, and with no prisoners to watch. So we decided to explore the prison. We explored the tunnels that went underneath the prison, the old barns, the old unstaffed gun towers. We eventually decided to go look at the old condemned part of the prison from my earlier experience. There was a big metal gate that was about halfway down the hallway that had to be opened by the big skeleton key. We get back to the old condemned part and my friend tells me about how this part was supposed to be the old segregation. We had to use flashlights to see in there because this section's so old it's not even supplied with electricity. The energy we felt back there, I'll never forget. I was just filled with a feeling of complete and total dread. We had started to head back down the hallway to where the gate was when his flashlight suddenly died. We made it to the hallway, barely able to see anything in the almost pitch blackness. We were at the door when we heard someone running after us, so my co-worker fumbled with the key as we heard it getting closer. We got the gate open and sprinted out of there, and that was the last of my explorations in the prison. And I, for one, do not blame you, sir.
No, I was thinking, not to minimize the internal politics of the carceral system and working in it, and it's a whole thing, I understand. However, I will say, I want to have a job where I can explore like the Goonies. Well, it's 3 a.m. and all the murderers are apparently asleep. I'm going to go off in search of adventure. Yes. I don't know that I would do that.
Why not? What have you got to lose?
I've seen Natural Born Killers. I've seen how it ends for Tommy Lee Jones. I got lots to lose.
T2.
Also this, also ends very badly there. I had a look around. They're probably talking about the Michigan Reformatory, which closed in 2022. So I don't know what's happened to the building now, but it is presumably still schlock full of terrifying ghosts.
Yes, running ghosts are never nice.
No, good. It's like running zombies. Except you can't see them. I found this other sort of corollary story, just a very short little thing, again, just in bits and comments on different forums. When I used to be an officer, sometimes the fuses would blow in certain cells. So behind the cells was a long maintenance hallway you'd have to go through in order to get to the fuse box for the cells or plumbing. Sometimes if maintenance didn't show, we would have to do it if we knew how. This hallway behind the cells looked like a movie. It was dark, damp, wet, and you'd see a rat or two scurrying around. I remember going there to flip the switch, and I saw something standing in the middle of this dark, damp hallway about 20 feet from me. I thought it was an inmate, so I yelled again and started walking towards the figure, and the figure just fell through the floor. I kind of knew right? Yeah.
Bye.
Later, bitches. I kind of knew right then and there that it was probably a ghost or spirit, so I wasn't super freaked out. Okay. I guess given a choice between ghosts or an inmate who has cornered you in a dark corridor all alone, yeah, fine. Okay, yes, ghost is a better option.
Yes, yeah.
Man, hard pass. I think I've told you before, I have an uncle. Well, it's Nick's uncle. He works in a women's prison in the UK, and he said the scariest thing there is when the inmates talk to you. He'll walk into a room with because of course, as I'm sure you know, I don't know why I'd say, what it's like in a woman's prison, Paul.
I've seen those documentaries.
Exactly. Yeah, the documentary Caged Heat with Linda Blair. I've seen it too. Yeah. He's said that essentially the instructions are, if any of the inmates comes on to you, you leave right away.
Yes.
and he's a very quiet little guy, very like classic Englishman, little stick arms, beer belly, and very quiet. And he just will walk into a room with his little bucket and pail, and one of the women will say, "Ooh, have you come to give me a seeing to?" And he's just, "No, ma'am," and you just roll your bucket back out the door.
Bye.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Homer disappearing into the hedge.
That's more or less what he describes. Yeah, exactly. Same body type too, I might add.
Yeah. My best mate's dad was a screw at Wakey prison, Wakefield, which is notorious.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some of the worst are kept in Wakefield.
Interesting.
Including a man in a box on the in the cellar who's locked up for 23 hours a day.
Who's that?
Robert Maudsley.
I don't think I know the name.
Yeah, he got sent to prison in the 1970s. He was sexually abused as a child. It's quite a sad story. And he ended up homeless and was running tricks to get by. And on one particular evening, he was sexually assaulted by a client, and so he beat him to death and was sent to prison. Unfortunately, Maudsley has now killed 4 people, 3 of whom he's killed in prison. He has a real dislike of paedophiles, and on, I think, the first person he murdered, they basically him and another inmate barricaded themselves in his cell, and they tortured him for a specific period of time, and eventually chopped him up into little bits and started eating parts of him.
Good Lord. That's 2 cannibalism references on this show. That's a first for us.
And and Maudsley's done it a couple of times. But some prisoners said, I don't understand what the problem is, because, if you're not a paedophile, you're fine. But yeah, he was. I don't know if he still is. The thing is, he's a very eloquent, well-read man.
Interesting.
And he's been interviewed before, and he's basically said, I just wish they'd kill me, because I don't have a life. This is not living. I don't see what the point is. And he is essentially kept like Hannibal Lecter. He's in a plastic box. So, and he's probably the most notorious British prisoner you've never heard of, Maudsley.
I was going to say, I've heard vague references to a prisoner who was known for killing pedophiles, but I don't think I ever knew his name.
Robert Maudsley. Not sure if he's still at Wakey. In fact, let's check. Is he still alive, I think? Yes, he is 71. He's killed 4 people, 1 that took place at a psychiatric hospital where he was being evaluated, and 2 in the prison after receiving a life sentence for murder. Wow. Initial reports falsely claimed he ate part of the brain of one of the men he killed, which earned him the nickname Hannibal the Cannibal and the Brain Eater. Newspapers have been advised that the allegations were untrue, according to the post-mortem report, and Maudsley is the longest-serving British prisoner in solitary confinement. He hasn't killed anybody since 1978.
But they still got him locked up like Magneto.
Yeah, so in 1983, Maudsley was deemed too dangerous for a normal cell, and prison authorities built a 2-cell unit in the basement of Wakefield Prison. Due to his history of violence, when outside his cell, he is escorted by a minimum of 4 prison officers.
Jesus Christ.
In 2000, Maudsley unsuccessfully pleaded for the terms of his solitary confinement to be relaxed or to be allowed to take his own life via cyanide. He also asked for a pet budgerigard, which was also denied, and has since said that his life has no meaning and he just wished he could die.
I mean, I hesitate to say I'm sympathetic given the circumstances, but I'm sympathetic in that, it's a strange kind of stasis.
Yeah, if you, I mean, like I say, he has done interviews with television and the press, and he is one of those people that you would be stunned when you find out what he's done. Other people will say, well, has he really? I mean, this is the situation, isn't it? I mean, murder's murder. And some people don't think Maudsley's the same as say, somebody like Peter Sutcliffe or Dennis Nielsen, because they murdered innocent people, whereas Maudsley's only killed criminals.
Yeah, I don't claim to have an answer, but I will say that the one thing I think about my coldly rational brain is if you've got someone who has demonstrated they're willing to cross that line, maybe for what you might say a good reason, they're only killing bad people, but we have to maintain our faith in his definition of bad person staying on our side of the line.
Precisely.
That's where I kind of run into a little bit. I get a little bit like, it's like when I read that book about militarization and policing, and it said everyone loves state power when it's doing what they think it should be doing.
Yeah.
But once it starts operating counter to your interests, everyone gets a lot less enthused. And I feel that way about letting murderers loose.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there will always be exceptions to the rules, and there will always be situations where people have murdered somebody in self-defense, and there are countless miscarriages of justice where people have had to do that, where it's basically kill or be killed. And thankfully, the law, certainly in the UK, seems to treat those particular cases in a more sympathetic and balanced and nuanced manner, which I think you can, because often it's very easy to get swayed by the shock or the baseness of reporting in certain circumstances and certain cases. And I think it takes a lot of effort for people to disentangle themselves from emotional language being utilised and described. And I think often that kind of colours any conversation when we talk about serious offenders, regardless of their crimes.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Sorry, my microphone stand just fell apart. Give me a sec.
I thought something had happened.
God damn. All right, I'm back, I think.
Good.
Motherfucker. All right, we're coming back from an edit because my microphone fell off the fucking mic stand, and I just put moisturizer on my hands. I couldn't screw the goddamn thing back in.
These are the new men we are.
Good Lord. I like I said, my fingers get dry and then I chew them when they're dry, so then they bleed. So I started buying this cream that sort of gently repairs your hands. But if you're planning on assembling something, you shouldn't coat your hands in grease. Well, I didn't think I'd be assembling something today, so...
Even your hands have gone woke.
This is the future liberals want. Everything's slippery. Just before we move on to the next story, I want to say there's an American prisoner who is in a similar situation to the British fellow you were talking about. He's a guy named William Boscott.
Oh, yes.
Are you familiar with Willie Boscott? Yeah. So, folks, if you ever want some information on that story, Boscott is also in a Magneto-esque cell, or was at least until recently. There's a book called All God's Children, The Boscott Family, and the American Tradition of Violence by Fox Butterfield. It's old. It came out in 1995, but it's a really kind of interesting treatise on Southern violence and the carceral system up to that point. If you're interested in social literature, social sciences literature, check it out. I was a jail nurse for about 3 years in a correctional facility that housed approximately 1,300 inmates. Loved the job and would have stayed longer, but administration was terrible. Anyway, I worked the night shift and have stories to tell. I worked both booking and infirmary, but the majority of the incidents occurred in infirmary. The first happened after I'd been there for maybe a month. Not a new nurse, but new to corrections. Anyone who has spent any time in a jail will tell you that when those heavy doors slam shut, it is a very distinctive, definitive, loud sound. To get to the infirmary, you have to have a key or be buzzed in by central control. So I was sitting at my desk and I heard the metal door outside my office click, like someone from Central had unlocked it. It opened about halfway and then slammed shut. Now, in my office, there is a huge glass window so that nursing staff can see any inmates that are about to enter. So when the door slammed, I thought it was the officers dicking around. I jumped up and went to the window and no one was there. I called Central and the officer that answered sounded like I just woke him up from a sound sleep. I said, "Ha, very funny." He had no idea what I was talking about. I knew this officer and was surprised that he would go along with any type of prank because, frankly, he was kind of a jerk-off with absolutely no sense of humor. So I just thought it was some mechanical glitch. I sat down and everything just changed. It felt colder, like I was being watched. I was just all around uncomfortable. I took my stethoscope from around my neck and put it on the desk, then left the office to go back to the medical department. I stayed in medical for a few minutes, talking to the staff in there, and then went back to my office. When I walked in, I went to grab my stethoscope off the desk to check an inmate. It wasn't there. I looked on the desk, on the side, underneath. It just wasn't there. I should mention that when I left my office, I did lock the door as per protocol, and I'm the only one on shift with a key. Now I thought I was going crazy. So I started looking everywhere, could not find it. In my office, there was a large closet that held all the supplies. This was also locked, with the key being on the same set of keys that I carry. Anyway, later in the shift, I needed to go into the closet and get something. I don't really remember what, but sitting in the middle of the floor was my stethoscope. I picked it up and the heavy metal door outside my office clicked again, opened halfway, and slammed shut. I locked the closet, locked my office, and went out for a smoke. I was scared shitless, but had responsibilities and patients to look after. So I went back in. And I swear the whole atmosphere felt lighter. It was warmer and I just felt more comfortable. After my shift, the central officers rewound the tapes for me, and I saw the doors just open and slam shut with not a single person near them or in the hallway. I wish I could say that was the last time that happened or that I got comfortable with it, but I didn't, because each time it happened, it seemed that the doors slammed harder, and that uncomfortable feeling lasted longer and longer. It almost felt like I was being stalked. Things that went missing were found in different parts of the jail: my pen case in the women's wing, my med sheets and solitary central control room, my portable blood pressure cuff in the kitchen. And each and every time something of mine would show up in some other part of the jail, the officers and I would look at the tapes and see no one. Remember I said I felt like I was being stalked? Well, that's because all these things happened to me, but no other nurse who worked nights. Not one other nurse who worked on my days off had any doors click open or slam shut. Their stuff didn't disappear and then reappear somewhere else. It was just me. Every officer and every one of the medical staff who worked there well before I got there swore up and down that this type of incident never occurred before. It got to the point for me that I started just not staying in my office. I got all my stuff I needed for my shift and sat at the officer's desk. I did that until I left there and got another job. I haven't had anything like that happen again. And I gotta say, Paul, I think the most frightening thing about that story, about almost any story, is still just the managerial incompetence that you get in large administrative systems.
Yes, more bullshit bureaucracy.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. That's like a commonality among almost every little bit of anyone working in some kind of system like that is just, well, the managers are idiots. You know, the people working at the ground level, they do what they can, but the managers are useless. And funny enough, I'm actually helping someone deal with this right now. They're dealing with a system where just management has essentially abandoned ship. They're still there, physically, but they're just mentally completely checked out.
The lights are on, but no one's home.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wheels spinning, hamster's dead. The Ghost Story Guy's official position on just the overarching bureaucracy of our culture: the wheels spinning, the hamster's dead.
I suppose that's an unusual series of occurrences there, and it clearly seems to be that for whatever reason something took a shine to her. I don't think that's malicious. I think that's attention. Wanted to be
yeah,
noticed.
it does seem like attention. I don't know that I would particularly want this attention, but it doesn't necessarily, as you say, feel. Although she says she felt at certain points a little more intimidated.
Well, I suppose you would do regardless, even if it's just trivial things, like you say. It's things that cause a bit of frustration or annoyance, and maybe sometimes you might think, "Oh, bloody hell, that's a bit silly." But I suppose when it keeps happening over and over again, and it's different items, then it seems to transcend, like you say, it can't be a prank. And to be fair, that's not the kind of environment that people would leave medical equipment laying around, because I'm sure there would be somebody who could put those to a different kind of use.
Well, I was thinking that it seems like a bad environment to be just having yourself a scavenger hunt.
Well, there's not much you can't turn into a weapon if you really want to.
That's a Paul Bestall promise. It's making sure he gets his share of the ad revenue on the first of the month.
Oh, get my shank out. Then we'll see who's the daddy.
Oh, I don't want to see who's the daddy. I don't.
Good.
Stay on that side of the ocean, please.
That's right.
Oh boy, this is just getting worse. Boy, am I glad it's the end of the show.
Cabin fever set in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, everything's fallen apart. We had, as I say, my microphone literally fell off the stand and wouldn't reattach. We've had internet connection issues. I had a call before this. I had a meeting before this, and there was a problem with the platform. I was actually working with someone from the platform on like setting up this account, and they could not understand why the problem was happening. They were having exactly the same issue. They said this never happens. And it was me and Brennan on the call, and he had just finished working on a story about a witch who a woman had written a book about, and that woman's computer kept crashing while she was writing the book about the witch. And I had just finished looking up all that shit about the Lima Sheraton. So all I can say, Paul, is I'm excited we have a Prisons Part 2 coming for next episode 197. Because what else will happen?
Who can say? Which other strange criminals can I drag out of my mind?
I'm always excited to see that. I fully expect, Bronson to appear or...
Well, Bronson is a prime example of someone being created by the state. Because Bronson went to prison for armed robbery. All the worst crimes he's done have been in prison. And he's essentially become institutionalized. They've created a monster that they can't release.
And we will tell that story on Haunting and Lockup Part 2. That'll be episode 197.
He's one of the lesser Tottenham fans I'm proud of. He's no Sir Kenneth Branagh.
That's fair. I mean, you got to have a range of people in the clubhouse.
As that sports can appeal to everyone, as that example there shows.
Exactly. So if you work in a penitentiary, in a jail, somewhere like that, military prison, if you have a story you want to share, send it to ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. Again, episode 197 will be out in 2 weeks' time, and we would very much like to feature it on that episode. Also, before we go to our C segment, I want to shout out Brody Daniels, who found the stories for this episode. Brody, of course, our new junior researcher here at the Ghost Story Guys.
And if you've ever eaten somebody you didn't like in prison, please let us know.
Sure, what the hell. ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. Just don't send us pictures.
Again.
Oh, wait. We're not going to... Never mind. So there's a whole lot of ways you can interpret that.
Goodness. I don't know what you mean.
No, I know.
I think it's rude.
Scandalous. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hey there, listeners. Before you reach for that skip 15 seconds ahead button, I promise you this isn't an ad. We wanted to take a minute to talk to you about mental health. On this show, I've always tried to be as honest and open as possible about my struggles with depression and anxiety, because even though we've come a long way towards acknowledging the very real damage these things can do, there is still way too much lingering stigma about reaching out for help. And when you start to feel like there's no help, it's easy to start feeling like there's no hope. But Paul has joined me today to remind you there is always hope and there's always help.
We're not going to try and talk you out of self-harming right now, because we know that's not how it works. Instead, what we wanted to do was tell you something now and hope that should things get bad, you'll remember it and make a phone call or send a text message before you make any permanent decisions. As someone who knows all too well just how important mental health can be, it's never too late to reach out.
In Canada, the number to call is 133-456-4566. In the USA, the new number to call is 988. That's 988.
In the UK, the number to call is 116123, or text SHOUT, that's SHOUT, to 85258. In Australia, the number to call is 131114.
However bad shit seems, it will pass. And no matter what your brain might be telling you at any given moment, and believe me when I say I know this intimately, there are people who love you and people who care deeply about how you treat yourself. Should a time come when you find yourself despairing, please know that we've both been where you are, and there is a way back to the world. Take care. Welcome back. The Ghost Story Guys are Luke Greensmith, who helps us find our stories. He's also host of the Lukelore podcast, available everywhere fine podcasts live. Brody Daniels, who also helps us find our stories. Tanya Downing, who manages our Facebook community. She's also co-host of the Streaming into Madness podcast with Walter Whitaker. Joseph Camo, who helps manage our YouTube account. He's also host of the Sociology Professor YouTube channel and co-hosts Weird Together with me. Sarah Kent, who manages our Reddit community.
Our paranormal conductor is Mr. Brennan Storr.
My friend, my co-host, is the one, the only, the inimitable Paul Bestall, the paranormal Johnny Carson himself, host of Mysteries and Monsters. Paul, what's coming up on M&M?
This week I'm diving into strange extraterrestrial encounters with my good friend Ronald Kinsella joining me before we delve into some witchcraft the following week with the megastar of self-publishing, the wonderful T.J. Green, witchcraft author extraordinaire, who now lives in the Algarve, which is very nice and shows you how far you can come in 17 years as being a self-published author, from working full-time to now living a wonderful life as a full-time writer in the beautiful country of Portugal.
That is an inspiration to us all.
Absolutely. She's a phenomenal success. You will not... The amount of books and reviews she has on Amazon is incredible.
All right. And where can everyone find you online?
You can find Mysteries and Monsters across all social media platforms apart from one. And I will mostly be seen lurking and bothering things on Threads these days, which I seem to have enjoyed again.
As we said at the top of the show, we couldn't do this without our patrons, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube subscribers. So if you'd like to join that esteemed community, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys, or sign up to GSG Premium via Apple Podcasts or YouTube. You get access to bonus episodes, an ad-free feed, the live streams that Paul and I do every month. You can also sign up to be a member of Ghost Force and have your name read out on every second story episode. And really, you just you help show your support for the show. I mean, if you can't afford it, we get it. Money is hard to come by these days. Just downloading the show, send us an email, send us a story. That's enough. But if you got the extra cash to help grease the wheels of this big machine, then, well, we would certainly appreciate it. Again, that's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys, or sign up to GSG Premium via Apple Podcasts or YouTube. If you want to pick up any Ghost Story Guys merchandise, head to our website, ghoststoryguys.com. Again, that's ghoststoryguys.com if you want to pick up some GSG swag. Our theme song, Radio Into the Darkness We Go, is composed and performed by Peter Kursoff of Pizzanta Music. Find more from him by searching for Pizzanta Music wherever you get your tunes. And I guess that's going to do it.
Well, we'll be back next week, but until then,
into the darkness we go.
you need to get one of those live, laugh, love signs to banish them.
I think that just destroys marriages. I don't think that actually gets rid of anything else.
It's not the worst thing. I remember doing some voluntary work many years ago, cleaning out a local river, and one of the chaps turned up to help us who worked for the river authority or whoever they are, and he had the worst tattoo of Freddy Krueger I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, no.
It literally looked like it had melted.
Oh, God.
It's not the worst tattoo I've ever seen, but it was certainly the worst Freddy Krueger I've seen on somebody happy to show it off.
You do wonder, like, do you not see what I'm seeing? Or do you have some kind of reality distortion field? Because I want some of that. I need some of that.
Maybe it's just a dream. And he is Freddy Krueger.
Are you going to the Maxim party? I don't think we have to do that, Gary. This is just a movie. No, I won't do it. Okay, well.
Gonna fight raccoons.
The paperwork for episode 77. Oh, God. Sounds like someone got hit.
Even I heard that.
Oh, actually, I have a very nice review to share with you here. I love your podcast. I thought I would just say that. This was the first time seeing your face for some reason. I thought you guys would have big beards. God, and I've got fucking moisturizer on my hands, so everything's slipping.
Is that what they call it these days?